Well, hey guys, it's Saturday morning right now. Spent a little time in the shop, just getting some stuff done. It's finishing up all the organization, so we're actually fully cleaned up. Got the back room nice and cleaned out. I actually spent some time now looking at this block and this parts here for Dave's 401 for his 73 Javelin, the black and silver one you guys saw in the videos earlier in the year. We're actually built a fresh kind of a street strip motor for the car. So we got some parts here for that. So we're gonna actually take a few minutes, kind of inspect what we got, everything, see what's usable, see what's not at the current time. We'll see what has to be reworked, all that kind of stuff. I know the block has to go to the machine shop. It's just the spots on it that's been kind of floating around from parts have been floating around from truck bed a little too much. So there's some things I know we got to look at. I'll see how in depth that's going to be here in a little bit. So first things first, we'll put this bad boy on the stand right here. So after taking a few minutes trying to put the bolts on for the engine stand, a plate basically, I realize the holes are a little crappy. Figure on a tap through real quick, and as you can tell, I always do this anyway. It's always just a lot of junk and crap that's always in the holes from motors sitting around. I mean, you can see in this one here in a second. Once the threads, we can finally get out of there and see a bunch of stuff like this that's caught in there. And once this block gets back in the machine shop, I'm going to chase all the holes and everything anyway. All the head bolts, all the timing car bolts, all the holes anyway. So, but I'll chase these ones now, so I put the engine stand plate on. It's actually sitting on there nicely, and the bolts aren't fighting me the whole way in. We got everything in the back room now anyway, so we got the heads over here, cranks here, obviously the block, I got something rolled back here a second ago. Got the rings over here. I'm gonna pull the pistons are out of the box here, show you guys what's going on with that. I'll kind of go over the parts first, and then we'll kind of dive into what's going on with each individual part individually. I made it back to finish taping anyway. I had to spend a little more time on the White Eagle getting some stuff done. I got the inner fender welded up and a couple other small things done. But anyway, this video might be a little bit more in depth than everybody may want to watch about engine parts and that kind of stuff. But if you really want to know more about engines and what to look for when you're buying a core motor to build a motor, whether it's a race motor, a street motor, or a nice river motor to put in your show car, this is kind of some good information to look for when you're buying that core motor to put a 401 in your Javelin finally, or in your AMX, or just building a nice race motor, or even just buying a nice 304 to put in a cruiser, you know, whatever that might be. So anyway, we'll kind of get into the nitty gritty of what you should kind of look for, what's there, what's supposed to be there, what's not, and what's some good signs, what's some bad signs. I'll kind of go through what I look for in a motor, parts, what's bad, what's good, and what direction we might go depending on the application, whether it's a street strip kind of motor, full race motor, or just a motor for a Wagoneer you're going to ride around with, and it really doesn't matter. So anyway, we'll get to it. So anyway, we're going to start off with the heads right here. These are a set of 090s. They're actually 73 heads, coincidentally enough, going into a 73 Javelin, so that actually will be kind of a good fit anyway. And these heads are not from this motor. This motor is about kind of as a short block-ish kind of combination, so these are off another motor Dave had laying around in the barn. So these look like a pretty good set of heads by looks of just kind of looking at them generally, and they got some nice carbon on the bottom yet. Looks like they were used within the last century, which is kind of handy to see. They're not terribly rusty or anything, like they're kind of more or less taken care of, or at least on a motor that was assembled. In that case, there's a little, Velcro blue stripe peeling off there a little bit, but that will clean up pretty nice. And looks like the surfaces look nice enough. You might not have to actually even deck them, might be able to clean them. We may deck them anyway, just to make sure we don't have true surfaces for what we're doing in this case. We'll see how they look once they get cleaned up. But anyway, it looks like it's got a pretty, it had a valve job just by how low the valves are sitting in here, because your intakes are sitting a little lower. They're kind of almost level right here. You can kind of tell, because otherwise, also will show you if the head's been decked before too. If it's an original head, that it actually has been decked. Original hasn't had a valve job and has been decked. Usually the valves will be almost protruding through right here. Sometimes you can almost kind of feel them. These ones are a little bit above currently, so these probably were decked at one point already. And they have had a valve job too. So Usually you'll deck a set of heads on their bare castings before you actually reassemble them again and do the rest of the valve job. So anyway, but pretty good hardware though. We'll see what we got. Double valve springs already on them. Not sure what they are though. We'll probably change them because we have a cam we're planning to put in this motor, and we'll match the springs with the cam we're installing. So these are a set of 090s, so they had rotators originally. As you can tell, the different locks and retainers. These look more similar to a V-style retainer, which would be a stock retainer that comes on like a 72 and later motor. Anyway, it's a very strong retainer. We run them on race motors actually as a stock retainer, and they work very well. And the V retainers are holding our double valve springs. We run 926 16s usually on most of our motors, because I'm not running hellacious cams. But, and more of the street strip cars, I should say. And the V retainers held them very nicely. So, and we've used them pretty consistently over time. But anyway, with the rotators though, if you guys don't know what the rotators are, I'll kind of show you here in a second. So rotators were on a 73 and 4 situation. So they came on 090 heads in 73, and they came on 502 heads in 74. There was some 74 on 090s, but that's pretty early in the year. Anyway, so a standard valve, we'll say this is a 3-groove. This would be from a Bridge Pivot 502 head right here, like a 75 and newer head. Has a regular V retainer, as I was stating right here, which is a pretty beefy retainer on the bottom side, nice and thick, stock factory retainer. Anyway, so exhaust valve rotator was set up like this. This actually has a the cup the spring sits on, and the piece where the locks sit actually rotates every time the valve goes up and down in the guide, was the thought process to avoid burning exhaust valves. Which the thought was great, but the problem with them was these actually failed with not a lot of mileage on them, and then you drop valves, and then you had lots of blown up motors. So, but they also made a goofy valve, so it's a 3A stem, and it has an 11/16 top on it that steps down for single groove locks and retainers, which is why this was done for eliminate the rotators. This retainer was put on there with the small top stem on the valve, with 11/32 locks and the retainer, but still a 3A stem. As you can kind of tell, it's still a beefy looking stem in there underneath the valve seal. So it's always something to look for, and usually 73 and 4 heads usually will have some work done just because of this case, because the rotators did fly apart at some point and they needed to fix them. So, but I will say this looks like a pretty good valve job. I don't have a straight edge on me, but you can kind of just generally look down the valve tips. They look pretty nice and flat. They don't look like they're oblonged and all over the place, which is a good sign of a good valve job. And they look pretty clean. The ports, we do have a little bit of rust forming, nothing ridiculous, a little bit of stuff in the threads, but we're going to clean that up later. And we'll see a pretty decent set of heads they probably can clean up with not a whole lot of work in that case. Which is a good thing. You always want to buy a set of heads that look more similar to this as opposed to a rusty set. The biggest problem with our heads from AMC is our seats are part of the head. So if you have a set of really crusty heads, it's kind of an issue because a lot of machine shops don't want to put seats in an AMC head because they have to cut a chunk out of the bottom of the head and insert the seat, and it gets very close to the water jacket on an AMC head. So a lot of machine shops, I guess, or in my area, do not want to do that. They want to avoid that at all costs if they can. So if they got a very crowded set of heads, like they've been sitting by the side of the garage in the rain, they're probably not the heads you want to choose for your next rebuild. Obviously, maybe they're good, maybe they're bad, but it's something to definitely pull valves out before you even bring them anywhere to verify if you have seats that are even worth working on, or they're probably just some nice paperweights, or nice end table in your house or something you can make out of them. That's probably both they're useful at that point if they're too bad. But I've had some sets we've gotten in, I've sandblasted because they've been that rusty just to see if they're even usable to get reworked, and they were getting to we had somebody get chunks out of the seat and everything else, big pock marks where you have to basically put in seat inserts in them. So not saying people don't do it, it's just not as common. Machine shops would like to get around it if they can. Anyway, so a set of heads look like this from the swap meet. If they're a little more money, it's worth it because you're buying a better part, so it's less machine shop bill in the future. So anyway, that's kind of what I'll talk about the heads. We'll move on to the pistons. So these are some Steel Powers pistons and rods. You've got stock 401 rods on a set of, I believe these were 40 over pistons. Yes, they are 40 over. You can tell right there, or 40 thousandths of an inch bigger right there. And they look like they only ran too much. There was no rings came with this motor, but they're in bags, as you can tell right here. And they are not really organized. Obviously, if we do use these pistons, we're not going to use those rings because, well, they're not organized anymore, and we're going to rehole the block anyway. So one thing I do see is they were balanced before, as you can tell from some of these top pieces here being cut down differently. And I don't particularly like the fact that this one's really, really tall like this, and this one's like super, super short. That doesn't look appetizing in this case. So I will probably toss one of these on my scale over here, and we'll see what we get comparison-wise, if they weigh about the same or they don't. I'm guessing they were done to weigh the same, but usually you would take some weight off the upper rod, the wrist pin area too, to get some weight, not grind all of it off the cap. He usually would do that job, which it was all taken off the cap on this one by the looks of things. These are a hodgepodge of rods though too. If you look at the markings on them, this one says 2, and I think there's like, there's number 5 right there. I think there's another number 5. Yeah, another number 5 right here, and another number 3, and I think there was number 6. I think that was a 7, and there was a 8. I think there was 2 6s or something like that. So this motor was 2 number 2s. So obviously these rods are from different motors originally when they were used, which isn't a terrible thing if they're balanced correctly. But in this case, as you can tell, some rods are heavier than others. That's why the caps are so ground down. So we'll toss them on the scale here in a second, see kind of what we got for weights, if they are similar or not. So first things first, we'll try one of the tall caps, see what that actually weighs. We got a little meat on top, see if we got a similar weight on the 2 combinations. So let's see what we got here. 3.97. So okay, that's our first number. I'll do one of our smoke down caps, our low down daddies over here. Okay, so within reason, they're within about 3 grams. That's a little bit more spread than I like in the first place, which obviously they do look a lot different though too. So it's obviously they're close, which is a good thing, but 3 grams is a decent amount off for the motor we're building behind this right here. This motor will probably be going on the strip at about, be shifting at 6,000, pulling the lever, about 6,100, somewhere in that range. Probably mostly at 6,000 where you want to live. It's probably where the chip's going to be at, and that kind of thing. And it's in stick cars. It's going to see a lot of clutch dumps and burnouts and that kind of stuff. It's going to be a lot of dynamic load on this motor. It's going to be doing a lot of work. So something like this where we have kind of odd looking rods and kind of messy looking, now we're going to go with this motor. So probably what we'll do is get a nice set of stock rods, stock rolling rods. We have more sets that are nice original from one motor, so they're all the same casting number, because the casting numbers actually will show us they weigh more than other ones. So a bunch of these are from mold, or casting mold number 12. You can see it right there on the actual in the rod. This is from casting mold number 23. So depending on the material that went into that cast, this rod probably weighs more than this one, which is obviously why a cap that's way more ground down than this one right here, because they're not all from the same motors. There's a lot more work on these 2 rods to make them match the same weight, because not all castings are done equally. So what it is, I mean, they have a sand mold, they're pouring molten metal in there, and then whatever the weight is, the weight is. That's why usually they have a match set in a motor. As long as they're all the same weight together, it's fine. It's when they're odd weights you end up with the harmonics being a major issue. So in this case, we don't want goofy harmonics. We want the rods to stay in the block is definitely the main goal, like with any motor build. But obviously you're playing around doing more racing and that kind of stuff, it's what you want. Anyway, don't mind the smoke right now. My dad's still welding more on the Eagle, so it's gonna be looking a little foggy in here. So got the fan on, but sometimes it comes in this room because it's a little colder sometimes. But anyway, so that's what we kind of found in the rods. So I would say you're looking for a set of rods that are in a box. I just thought this ones came. Look for ones that are all the same casting number at least, and have the same set of pistons on them, same kind of casting number, so it's actually a matched set. So even if you do it to buy pistons and punch your motor, you have a set of rods you can still use. They're all the same rods. These ones, not that way. Another real easy way to tell is they all have numbers on them right here, which people put motors together all know this. They actually have stamped. They'll stamp the rod and the cap together as a team. Like this says, it says number 5. This was number 3 in the motor it was in. Number 6. And that's number 7 down there. You can kind of see. So that's also an easy way to tell if the cap came from the rod as well. So it's kind of those small key things. And you're looking at parts on the ground in a swap meet. Kind of look for that a little bit, see if they're even usable for what you're doing. And stock rods work well for a lot of applications. I mean, I'm running stock rods on my race car right now. I'm turning 6,000 all day long, and I would trust stock trolling rods to do that. I mean, you can probably go about 6,500 with some rod bolts in them. I wouldn't really go past that too much, though. Starting to get a 6,500 RPM range, I'm also buy a set of Molners, put them in the block so you can, hold it to the moon to your heart's content. But anyway, this motor's not going much past 6, so stock rods will be plenty good. A matched set of stock rods will be the ideal for this build. So anyway, we're actually going to clean up the crank here quick, and get the grease off the journals and stuff, and we'll kind of go through this. It was greased before we got it, so everything's covered up. I do see there is some spots where there's some water damage on it, that kind of thing, so it's not the ideal what you're looking for. And also the snout looks like it's been through some shit, which isn't really great, but it is what it is. So we'll take a look at that too, see what we have for gouges and scratches, and see what we got going on. So well, as you can tell, I got the grease off the crank anyway, so got a little go-go juice. It's about 10 o'clock at night right now, so just gonna get some stuff done before I call it for the day. But anyway, I got the grease off and stuff, and as you can kind of tell, there isn't some not great stuff on this crank. Hence we got this kind of this bluing here, hence some water rust spotting, which is not ideal. Like I said, the snout's got a lot of dents and scratches, and it's actually surprisingly smooth, much as it looks like decent gouges. It probably will be okay, but there's also a lot of spots that you can see right here. Probably in that dark is actually better for that one. You can kind of see the 2 water spots in the bearings in that one. Same thing on this journal. Same thing on the journal over here. So this crank definitely set somewhere in a block with some water underneath it, which is not great. So looks like most of these you can't quite catch the fingernail. Actually, that one you can pretty heavily. So most likely this crank will have to be cut, which is not awesome. I mean, it probably would have to be anyway, but so more or less I was hoping if we could just polish it'd be ideal, but it looks like it may need some cutting going on. So before we get too excited with cutting, I'm gonna grab my caliper here. We're gonna measure the journals quick, see what they're actually at, if it has been cut already, since most 401 cranks you really can't, or AMC cranks in general, more or less kind of 20 thousandths undersized is kind of your rule of thumb at that point. You don't really want to go much more than that on the cranks. So we're gonna see if it's been cut already. It doesn't have much markings like it has been, which is a good sign, but we're gonna see. So, and I can use a mic for this, which would be the proper tool. But since we looks like we definitely got to work with it anyway, I'm just gonna use the caliper for now. It'll give us the number we're looking for. It's gonna be in the range. It'll either show 10 thousandths, gonna show the right size, or show 10 thousandths under, or 20 thousandths under. So, anyway, we're gonna go over the AMC book here. So I don't remember this number off the top of my head. So we'll rather go with the AMC book here. Got this 74 manual. It's kind of our shop manual. As you can see, it's seen better days. Yes, the GoPro is ready to turn off. So actually I see this page loose, so we're just gonna haul it with us. Anyway, it's a little easier to see what we got going on. So anyway, we got main bearing journal is gonna be 2.74 for the 6, for the 4 for the main, and then the other ones for the mains are gonna be 2.7474 to 89. So we're gonna put the caliper on quick and see what we get. So as you can see, caliper on the front here, make sure it's zeroed, and then we'll check it. I guess actually it should be able to work. I was thinking of mine now for a second there. Anyway, it looks like we are at 2.725. 725. So in relationship, so yeah, she's already, as far as that journal's the first one, that's been cut 20 already, so that is not great. That's already 20 under. So we're gonna go through them all here quick. We'll just write them down. See what we got. As you guys saw in time lapse, got everything all calipered in. And it looks like, looking at the book, I didn't show you guys the rod journals, so I'll show you that number quick too. So let's kind of recap here. For the number mains 1 through 4, the journals are going to be 2.7474, and then 2.7464 for the rear main. And then, you know, this is the widths basically. I didn't measure those at this time. I measured just the diameters in general. And then we got our connecting rod journal diameters is that's for a small motor. So 401 is 2.246 to 2.248. So what we got actually on our board right here is I got my mains right here and I got my rods. So the mains right now are 20 thousandths under mains because they're all about the 7.2s, more or less. The only one that was a little hair smaller, that was kind of like a 4.5, so I just kind of gave it a 4. And then our rods are 30 unders because the number is 2.24. And this would be your thousandth number right there. So that'd be 30 under rods and 20 under mains. So this crank has been through some stuff. It's seen the world. It's traveled a little bit, actually. So I would say for this motor, this crank is probably not going to be what we can use because it's got a lot of work done already to it. And to make it spin 6,000 all day long and not care, it's probably a little bit too much work done for what we're trying to do in this case. So I would say if we work in an application like a Wagoneer or something like that, like more driver kind of situation, it'd probably be fine. But in the situation of racing and beating on it heavily, I don't really feel comfortable with something like this because this needs to be worked on more from what it has. It's not, we can't use it as it is. It's going to be polished at the bare minimum and probably cut again, which is getting there in a spot I don't want to hang out. So yeah, it's not the most awesome thing to find, but it is what it is. So it's kind of hard when you buy motors in a box like this. You kind of get what you get. So now for the grand finale, we'll take a look at the block and see what we got here. So as far as the block goes here, this is supposedly supposed to be a 40 over 401, hence the pistons, which I'm not 100% sure if they came from this motor, but I'm starting to look at these parts now. Let's see if this actually is what the case, though. These don't look that scuffed at all. But in this case, also, it was freshly honed, though, by the looks of things. It's got really a nice crosshatch going on in the cylinders. So that was nice. One thing we did look at right away is there is some decent gouging on the surfaces, like this nice big line right here on the deck surface, which is not ideal at all. And also some other markings around there and that kind of stuff too. So this block ought to be decked regardless because I don't trust that to not leak water. For what we're doing, don't want any issues. So this deck surface looked pretty much the same. I think there was a couple marks on this one too. The cylinders looked about the same. I think there was a line, and there's a couple lines in this one you can kind of vaguely see in the camera. That one right there. I know there was a couple, I think in this number 5 over here. A couple little lines down there, kind of hard. Oh, number 7, that's what it was. Got some lines in the cylinders there you can kind of see. Oh, hello, Rambo, what's going on? Sniffing out all the good parts, see what's going on. Anyway, a couple lines in there. The lifter bores looked decent from what I looked at earlier. Kind of just took a glance at it, and they looked okay that way. There are some bearings in this motor still too. It's got the main bearing sitting in there, which obviously we're not going to reuse any bearings in this motor at all. The surface looks pretty nice overall. Needs to be cleaned obviously, but let's say 30 right here though. Okay, that's interesting. Well, with that being said, I guess first things first, let's check the bore, see what we got for actual bore sizing here. So, and I would use a dial bore gauge. I got the slide gauges. We'll use these for right now, just because doesn't really. It'll again. This motor's probably gonna have more work done, so I'm not gonna get into the 10 thousandths of an inch. Let's go in the thousandths of an inch. It'll give us a number, whether it's 30 over, or 40 over, 50 over, 60 over, whatever it's gonna be bore size. Because stock bore size is 4.195. So if we're over that, we know we're at some number. So obviously for 30 over that, we're gonna be at 4.165 is standard bore. 4.195 with 30 over. So, but yeah, we'll toss our gauges in here and put that in there, see what we get. Any snap gauges are pretty easy to use. More or less kind of stick them in the bore just like this. It's kind of hard doing one-handed usually, but Just kind of sit in the bore like this. You can tighten up your nut on the end there. Just kind of slide them out, just like that. And it keeps the distance you had in the bore. You take your hand down the caliper over here and measure your width. I'm gonna go through and measure all the bores quick, and then I'll put the numbers up on the board here, and we'll see what we got for bore diameters. Well, obviously you guys saw lots of measuring going on, so more or less what I did, so the numbers I have on the board make a little more sense. Took my slide gauges and I measured this way in the bore, and I measured this way in the bore, and then I averaged those two numbers, which was basically giving me 1/1000 of an inch off sometimes. Just because what this motor appears to be is a 30 over block that is, well, for instance, a used 30 over block, and then it was rehoned again, so basically the cylinders have an egg shaping to them. Because when a piston goes up and down on the bore, it basically is digging into the cylinder wall on this portion of the cylinder wall. Because the power stroke, basically, the cylinder's getting pushed against this wall, and then it kind of comes back, and then it gets pushed against this wall and kind of comes back. And the opposite would be on this side, but it's still, basically, it's going to be pushing against this side and then sliding on this side. It should be rubbing this side more than this side on the skirts. And on the power stroke side, it should be rubbing the bottom side of the cylinder more on the skirts than the top side, just because of how the motor is actually turning and how it's pushing the power. Anyway, what that's going to do is make an egg-shaped cylinder, which is kind of what we got going on here. So this right here is a couple thousandths more than this dimension in these bores, because they just rehoned a basically used 30 over block. In that case, though, these 40 over pistons are obviously not going to fit. I mean, they fit, but they are, that's a little tight there. It's almost in the lube category. Put them things in there. So they are tight. And if you run a motor with that much piston to cylinder clearance, she'll be locked up solid. So these obviously are not from this block. So another thing, kind of just a box full of stuff. Anyway, so here's the bores. So it is actually a 30 over block, just a little bit loose here. 4.206, which is, we got a little bit smaller over there, which the dial gauge might be a little bit off, so that gives this number we got here. But the skirts basically are more or less right now the exact same size as the bore. And when you do measure pistons, you are going to measure the skirt diameter to get your piston to wall clearance. You measure the skirt diameter in relation to your bore diameter. And with the bore dial gauge, these numbers would probably be a little more reflective of what they should be in relation to the pistons. But regardless, we got the numbers we wanted to know. We realized that the bores are too small for the pistons we have. Which is kind of the main goal here, without taking a dial bore gauge and going to town for a half an hour measuring stuff instead of like 10 minutes. So I had an inkling that was kind of the issue, looking at after the block was already labeled 30 over. Anyway, so kind of what we got here is the general case of a box of parts motor, where basically you have a crank that came from one motor, rods and pistons from another motor, and a block that's just from somewhere else. So this combination, probably this block could be punched. And truthfully enough, for the owner of this motor, actually, he has better parts, so we're probably going to use better on either another core motor or better parts for this job. Just because this motor is going to be beaten up pretty heavily and used a lot more, and if you are going to spend lots of money on a motor, you might as well start with a good core to machine in the first place. So he also has a 401 Cherokee, a 4-row Cherokee. This would be a good motor for that, because it's going to be more of a driver, just something to cruise around with. This would be a better setup for that than the Javelin anyway. So, but one thing I want to talk about too is when you're buying core motors, it's kind of what generally this video is kind of about, as I'm going through the parts here. When you're buying core motors, you're better off buying a motor like the ones on the stand right here, where it's kind of fully assembled. It costs more money up front, but it's got a lot more parts on it. You got your bolts are all there, your timing covers there, distributor gears are there, slingers there, all that stuff is there. And actually to work on the motors, you have all your bolts, you have all your fasteners, you have all your stuff inside. And usually when they're fully assembled, like this motor on the stand is right here, it's going to be maybe a 1000 motor. Most of the time, when it looks like they're all greasy and still full of all the wagon ear parts yet, it's going to be a standard a standard bore block, standard, mains and rods need to be fixed. But then you're the first person to do your 10-10 cut on a motor like that. That makes a great race motor in that case. So sometimes, I know the parts in a box look very appetizing, but sometimes you're more money ahead when building a more race-orientated motor, a street strip motor, or want to make some steam with it. Buy a complete motor. It's way more money ahead. And then all the machine, because you're going to pay the bill and machine work on this kind of parts to make these parts, something like that. You still need a timing cover, all your bolts, all the other parts to make this a complete motor. Because right now all we have here is a completely bare block, no valve train, no bolts, no timing cover, no camshaft, none of that stuff to see what was happening to the motor, what was wrong with it. You just have the evidence you have to figure out where you're at. So this will work, I think, for a good, nice Wagoneer engine, but probably if you're building the Javelin motor, gonna need some different parts for that situation. So, but anyway, hope you guys learned something. If you have any questions, you want to know something more measurements, please let me know. Answer in the comments, or I'll make another video on it in the future. So, and there will be more videos on motors in the future, because I'm actually going to be building a motor for this Javelin. It may not be this motor, but it will be a motor. So, so moral of the story: buy a complete core motor. Your machinists will love you a lot more. And even if you're building a full-on race motor, doesn't matter. You still got all the parts there to look at. You still got all your bolts there, and fasteners, oil pan, valve covers, everything they can see what it's supposed to look like. Because most machine shops don't see AMC motors all the time. So if you can bring them a complete one, they can at least dissect it on the way out when they're taking it apart and say, okay, that's how it all goes together. If you give them a bunch of parts in a box, I don't know what they're looking at. It's not a small block Chevy. But anyway, for all you guys who got the snow down there in the southeast and the kind of the eastern Midwest, hope you guys are doing good over there. On the bright side, at least it's not 20 below with the snow like it is here right now. So in Minnesota and everybody in California, hope you guys are being safe out there. Hope the fires get put out soon. But catch you all in the next one. Well, thank you guys for watching this channel. If you enjoyed what you saw, hit that like button, smash the subscribe button there too. We'll catch you all later.